Hello, this is Conquering History Games, and today is going to be the start of a different type of Kaiserreich guide series. It's going to be an introductory series for people who have perhaps not played Hearts of Iron at all, or more specifically, they have not played the Kaiserreich mod of Hearts of Iron 4. So this will not be an in-depth event guide. That could be done later if people request it, but the point of this is just to situate people who are looking at all these countries with new focus trees and new events, and they don't understand the lore, and just so they can kind of get their bearings and decide who they want to play as and get them thinking about how they want to play as these new countries. Now keep in mind that this game is still an open alpha. There are still updates that come out consistently, so that's why I'm starting here, so you can see that this is alpha 0.4.3, the PDXCon one. So if there's any changes that happen in future updates, then this video may not remain entirely accurate. But for today, I'm going to be showing you all the United States in Kaiserreich. Now, something you may have noticed when I was selecting this country is that Franklin Roosevelt is no longer in charge. This time it is Herbert Hoover. In this alternate world, a key part of the Kaiserreich is that the United States never entered World War I, and as a result it stayed very isolationist. However, the stock market does crash. Instead, this time it happens in 1925, and then Herbert Hoover is still elected in 1928. Now, he does retain through re-election in 1932. Franklin Roosevelt was not around to defeat him, but he only retains in 1932 via the process of getting a majority of votes in the House of Representatives. So this has very embittered the country, and it is much more divided during the 1930s than it was in our own timeline. So there are several political parties, as there are in most countries in Kaiserreich. Now, the political party system is much more important than it is in vanilla, and there are also much more of them. It's more complicated. The majority right now is the Republican Party, its conservative wing anyway, of market liberals led by Herbert Hoover. There's also the Democratic Party under John Garter, pardon me, and there is also the CSA, standing for Combined Syndicates of America, led by Jack Reed. And then there is the AFP, American First Party, which is led by Huey Long. These are the four major parties that are putting forward presidential candidates in November of 1936. But before we go over that, I also want to go over a few other things, just so you can see where you start out as when you are in the United States. And incidentally, I'm going to be going over a lot of information in this video. There will be timestamps in the descriptions, so if you want to jump to specific parts, you can do so. Now, you do not have a very big military at the start of the game. There's only 4 commanders. There's only 4 divisions that you have on the mainland, and there's one down here in the Panama Canal, who I would just recommend bringing up to the mainland, but it's up to you. Again, this is just a beginner's guide. You start with 4 research slots, which is nice. As far as military factories go, you have 24 naval dockyards and 7 military factories. But let's get to the stuff that you really want to see, the national focuses. At the start of the game, the United States actually cannot select any national focuses. If you click on all of the ones at the top, you'll see that they are grayed out, saying that you don't meet the requirements. And it is quite a big focus tree. It's bigger than the vanilla one. And this is not going to change until you have a government leader that's not Herbert Hoover. So for the initial part of the game, there is not going to be much going on if you're in the United States other than building your country, creating divisions, building factories, infrastructure, researching technology, things like that. The first event of real serious importance does not happen until September of 1936, which we are going to jump to now. In September of 1936, you will get the A Day in September event, and you must choose whether you want the presidential election to happen in about a month and a half, or if you want the military to step in and create a military junta that will rule the country. Now, when it comes time to making this decision, as well as future event decisions, it pays to go to the national focus tree. If you select that the elections must go ahead, you will unlock the 1936 election branch of your focus tree. And then in November, when you choose who your president is, you will then unlock that branch of the focus tree. We will return to that later. If you choose the day in September, you will unlock General MacArthur. He will become your dictator. Then I'll demonstrate that right now. As you can see, the national focus has been bypassed, and now you can select a new one. You can choose either Protector of Democracy or Destroy Domestic Enemies. I'm not entirely sure if it's a joke on the part of the developers or it's something that they're going to fix later, but both of these national focuses do the same thing. And as of now, those are still the only ones you can pick. As it says here, the American Civil War has to have started, or it has to be avoided for you to unlock the combat area of the national focus tree. And incidentally, if you want to see how to avoid the American Civil War, I have already done a video on that. I'll link it in the description. But this is, most of the time, 9 times out of 10, the American Civil War is going to happen. And you may even want it to happen, and I'm just exploring the options that you have leading up to that. But as I was saying, these are all grayed out right now. The fair deal you can only unlock if the Civil War is avoided, and you have no foreign policy either. Now, if you continue to play as Douglas MacArthur, you will get some events that happen, but eventually the American Civil War, the second one, will break out. So I'm just going to show you what happens at that point. Now, you will be faced with various decisions along the way. They don't matter too much. I wouldn't get hung up on them, but eventually the leaders of the other major parties in the United States will begin to declare civil wars, and as they rise up in rebellion. So they will begin to break off from the United States, and whenever one of these countries breaks off, you get the option to continue playing as the United States or playing as whoever's the one breaking off. In this case, it is the CSA. So for purposes of this video, we will stand by the Republic, and as you can see, a piece of the United States has broken off and become its own country underneath Jack Reed. I'll go into more detail about the various break-offs and rebellions that could happen later in this video. For now, we're going to return to the day in September, and I will show you what happens if you allow the presidential elections to happen. So in this playthrough, I selected that the elections must go on, and then you'll get national focus bypass. The 1936 elections are going to happen. Again, if you go to the national focus tree, you'll see it has been highlighted. However, you still cannot actually pick any of these men to complete their focus tree yet. So for right now, just continue playing as normal until you get to the election in November. In early November, you will get a decision to make regarding who will be the president and win the 1936 election. You have 4 options to choose from. You can be John Garner, the Democrat, Charles Curtis, the Republican, Huey Long, the American First / Union Party candidate, or Jack Reed, who is the head of the Combined Syndicates of America. Now, if you want to avoid the Civil War, again, I've already made a video about that. I will put it in the description. You will want to start here by picking Charles Curtis, and then there's still some more decisions you have to make. But just for the sake of this video, we are going to pick John Nancy Garner as a Democrat, because I don't want to create confusion regarding the Republican candidate, and Huey Long and Jack Reed are the so-called radical candidates. I'll come back to them later. So let's say we pick, or you pick John Garner as your winner. You will then bypass him on the national focus tree, and you can begin to select his events. The same thing would happen if it became President Reed, if it became President Long, or if it had become President Curtis. Now, you can select either of these focuses, or you could try to select something else, but you will see it is still grayed out because, again, the American Civil War has happened, nor has it been... the American Civil War has not happened, nor has it been avoided. So we're just going to select Banking Reform Act to just get something happening. And then whoever you pick as your president, be it Reed, Long, Gardner, or Curtis, the other members, the other extreme members, are going to protest this, and there will be events where you lose political power, you get negative national spirits, and tension continues to rise. For example, here we see that Long has established the Minutemen, and that is costing you political power. However, you will get a couple months, at least until Inauguration Day in January, where you can continue to build military factories, you can continue to research things, and so on and so forth. Something to keep in mind is that if you are planning on playing a certain country, a certain branch of the United States, you should probably build military factories in whichever section of the country is going to break off. So, for example, if you were going to play the combined Syndicates of America, you would want to build military factories in Illinois and Indiana and Ohio and such, to get ready for the Civil War that is going to happen, because those factories will still be there when the war comes. I'm just selecting things for research. Don't read too much into this. And now, while playing as Gardner, we are in February of 1937, and the CSA is going to rise up. Now, you will be faced with a series of decisions along the way, where you can choose how to treat members of the Huey Long Party and members of the Jack Reed Party. Again, don't get too hung up on it. It really doesn't matter. The Civil War cannot be avoided, and it is just something that when you're playing, you should expect to happen unless you're following my specific Avoiding the Civil War guide. So now I'm going to demonstrate what happens if you decide to abandon the United States and instead play as one of these breakaway countries. And I'm going to go through them one at a time, starting with the CSA. Now, as you can see, I've chosen to begin playing as the combined Syndicates of America. I'm not going to go into a ton of detail about them. If people want, I can do individual videos on each of the different focuses, on the different focus trees of each country, but as you can see, when you become the CSA, you do get a brand new focus tree which carries with it a lot of its own decisions, some of which are kind of similar to the other countries you can play as, but it is different, and it is something that would require its own video to go into detail about. Shortly after the CSA breaks away, the American Union state also will break away in the southeastern portion of the country. So if you choose to play as them, again, you will get your own focus tree, a brand new one. And as you can see, in some ways it looks similar to the CSA one, but in other ways it is different. Not long after the American Union state breaks away, it will get some additional states that join it, such as North Carolina, Arkansas, Louisiana, and Florida, so you have to watch out for that. You will begin to have members of your Navy defect from you. I would not worry about it too much. During the Civil War, typically navies do not play a major role. Now, after California leaves the Union, you get the choice if you want to play as them. So let's look at what the California tree looks like. And it is not just California that leaves, it's also going to be Oregon and Washington. Now, the Pacific states will not go to war with you unless certain events fire, but it should be assumed that they will be going to war with you. And just like the CSA and the American Union states, they will get their own focus tree that they can follow. Again, the details of this tree are outside the scope of this video. Finally, the last country that will break away from you will be the territory of Hawaii, way out here in the Pacific Ocean. Again, You can continue to play as the United States, or you can play as Hawaii. If you choose to play as Hawaii, just ignore all these, then you again get your own focus tree. Now it is relatively small, but it does allow flexibility. For example, you could see here the different ways that you could form your government and alliances that you could form and such, again outside the scope of this video. Something else that's going to happen is that the United States is going to lose its overseas territories. Japan will seize Guam, Liberia will be lost, etc. So I would not recommend investing in any sort of way in any overseas territories that you have prior to the Civil War. Regardless of which country that you play as, you will get events such as this where you will have new military units spawned so that you have an army to begin fighting the Civil War with. You will still retain, if you're the United States, the army that you started with and any troops that you have been training, but it is these spawned troops that will form the core of your army, whether you're in the United States or the Combined Syndicates or anybody else. There will also be an event where Canada chooses to seize New England because the New Englanders are scared. They've been cut off by the CSA and they're not in contact with the rest of the country. You can choose that is unacceptable and go to war with Canada, or you can say better than them than the Reds. You will lose this northeastern part of the United States. It will join Canada. If you don't let them do this, however, you will go to war. And just a bit of friendly advice, I think that's a very poor decision to make. The Entente is quite strong, and you're already going to be fighting a war with at least 2 other countries at the start of the game. It's not a good idea to face Canada and the entire Entente at all. So, again, for this example, better than the Reds. Now, there are some other decisions that could be made, but they're relatively minor ones. I'm trying to just highlight the major points, but just know that your manpower and your political power could be quite subject to slight fluctuations, but they're ultimately not a huge deal in regards to how you're going to conduct the war. So, assuming that you have stayed as the United States, and you find yourself in this situation, which would happen whether Gardner, Curtis, barring special circumstances, Reed, or Huey Long had been elected, you will now find yourself potentially at war with 3 breakaway members of the United States. Hawaii does not declare war on the United States. I've never seen it happen. So now, because the American Civil War has started, you have many more national focuses available to you. You can continue to research the ones that were underneath your president of choice, in this case, if you were Gardner instead of Long or Reed, or if you were Curtis. The General MacArthur one will be closed out to you, unless you went with the military junta, but even if you did, the Civil War will still break out. But you could begin to review the American military. You could begin the American war economy, which is the industrial tree, essentially. And you could even begin to do, well, actually, pardon me, you cannot, messed up my words there, you cannot do the Monroe Doctrine, though, until the Civil War is over, because this is all essentially your foreign policy, and you can't work on foreign policy until you get things under control domestically. By that same token, reconstructing America and everything underneath it is also not available until the American Civil War is over. So effectively, your options are to focus on your industry, to focus on your military, or to work on focuses underneath your leader of choice, which would be Gardner, Curtis, or MacArthur if you are still playing as the United States at this point. There's just one more thing I wanted to go over before ending the video, and that was the strengths and weaknesses of the United States. Now, you might be looking at this image and think, well, this looks pretty bad. And actually, it's going to get worse, because almost every time the Mexican states are going to declare war on you during this time to reclaim their lost territory. But it's actually not as bad as you think, as long as you do not go to war with the United Syndicalist States. I only have 4 divisions assigned here, but if I just do a cursory highlight, you'll see you actually have 33 divisions to work with. And there could potentially be more that spawn. The Pacific States of America, if you do go to war with them, they have to cross through desert, through mountains, through the Rockies here. It takes them a very long time to get to Denver, which is your capital. The American Union states and combined syndicates here have a barrier of your country between them. Sometimes it could be a good idea to just let their borders touch so they begin to fight each other and just accept that you're going to lose Washington. It's also relatively easy to cut off the CSA from foreign help as long as you cut off their eastern seaports here. And it also depends on who your leader is. I think most people would say that if you go the way of Douglas MacArthur, the war is incredibly easy, but you can win it with just about any of the with any choice that you make, as long as you play it smart. As far as strengths go, you still do have 4 research slots that you start with. Again, remember the CSA and the American Union State are at war with each other, so if you get their borders to touch, they'll hurt each other. You still have a pretty good industrial base with 47 civilian factories, and you could take back old land to get more. And then once the war is over, you're going to have an army that's experienced, you're going to get a bunch of political power, and you'll have to start rebuilding the country. That's what this focus tree here is, reconstructing America. But it's pretty easy once the Civil War is over, if you are victorious, to become the great industrial power that you are in vanilla Hearts of Iron 4. And then once that's done, you can begin to do your foreign policies and go after your other enemies. And as you can also see here, if you didn't go to war with the Pacific States at first, you do have events and focus trees that allow you to reclaim any land that you lost before. As far as weaknesses go, yes, you do start out in an enormous civil war. You will have some negative political power that will not go away for a long time unless perhaps you played as MacArthur. Your enemies are going to be getting a lot more volunteers than you do, particularly the combined syndicates of America. And you have enemies on literally all sides. You have no friends. There's no faction you can join, at least not at first. And so it's really going to determine your skill as a player, particularly when it comes to micromanagement, so that you could win the war, particularly in a speedy manner, because I have seen some civil wars that just drag on for years, and then the United States never really becomes relevant in the international scene. But if you do manage to win, you become perhaps maybe along with Russia, the deciding factor in all international wars, because whoever you side with is probably going to win the Weltkrieg or any other wars that happen. So you get to decide. You can almost get to decide: is the Entente going to take back France? Is Germany going to beat the Commune of France? You could go to war with Russia. You can go to war with the East. Depending on what you do and justifying war goals and such. But what I'm saying is the possibilities for the United States are virtually limitless. And so it's a very fun country to play. So I hope that this was helpful to you and you now have a better understanding of how to start playing as the United States in the Kaiserreich version of Hearts of Iron 4. Please subscribe if you want to be notified whenever I make more of these guides. And please let me know if there is anything you'd want me to change about the formatting of this guide as I continue to make more of them in the future, and suggest to me countries that you would like me to do introductory guides on. So thank you and have a great day.